The Bronze Age brings to mind the beginnings of writing, organised warfare, centralised states, massive irrigation projects in the desert, emperors, warlords, and chariots. One thing that doesn't really spring to mind though is the position of women, and especially women with power. But for over 20 years, the most powerful person in the Bronze Age world was a woman. One ruling the wealthiest kingdom ever seen, and she did so as a fully fledged pharaoh. But when she died, her legacy was purposefully erased. Today, people can barely even pronounce her name. So, who was Hatshepsut, and why is she considered one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs? Well, let's find out. The years before Hatshepsut's birth were troubling times for the Egyptian New Kingdom. Pharaoh Amenhotep I died without producing a male heir. Thutmose, a respected middle-aged nobleman from Thebes, stepped into the power vacuum, and around 1506 BC, he was crowned Thutmose I. Under his rule, Egypt's fortunes skyrocketed. The borders expanded and gold poured in. During this prosperity, Thutmose and his great wife Ahmose had a daughter, Hatshepsut. While in Egyptian eyes, a son would have been preferable, Thutmose I still had plans for his daughter. As soon as she could walk, Hatshepsut would have begun training to become the next god's wife of Amun. Amun was the patron god of Thebes and a creator god. He fertilized the universe alone through the use of his god's hand, which is imagery that I will leave to your own imagination. The Amun priesthood was like an ancient Egyptian Vatican, with immeasurable wealth, lands, and temples. The office of god's wife was second only to the high priest of Amun. If the god's wife did not perform the correct spiritual offerings or did not provide the activity that Amun's statue couldn't do himself, the universe would cease to exist. As God's wife, she owned massive estates and lands. So Hatshepsut learned from the best political, religious, and economic tutors in Egypt. Hatshepsut became God's wife at an extremely young age, probably before 10 years old. Thutmose I wanted the influential position filled with someone loyal to him. Standing by Thutmose's side at important events, Hatshepsut would have learned how to win wars and how building programs functioned simultaneously as job programs and propaganda. She grew up as the greatest priestess in the land. All that was left was to marry her full brother and become the king's great wife, which, while super weird and makes me physically uncomfortable, was used to produce the purest possible heir in Egyptian eyes. Then, tragedy struck. Her two full brothers and heirs to the throne died. At just 12 years old, Hatshepsut was the only pure royal child left. Her half-brother, also called Thutmose, who now became heir, was nothing like his father. Covered in lesions and born with an oversized heart and shortness of breath. And yet, everyone at court depended on this boy king to continue the Thutmosid line, and thus secure their own jobs and livelihoods. And then, tragedy struck again. Thutmose I died, leaving behind the boy too weak and too young to wield any real power. And so at the age of 12 or 13, Hatshepsut became king's great wife to her own younger half-brother, now called Thutmose II, which is 1, super nasty, and 2, insane. Hatshepsut was a teenager who was now the real power behind the Egyptian throne. An entire kingdom depended on her ability to conceive a male heir. Luckily, she was an important religious figure and had experience running her own estates, so she dominated their relationship and could advise Thutmose on how to run his own kingdom. Hatshepsut soon gave birth to a princess named Neferre, and it looked like the cycle of no male heir was repeating itself. Remember that Thutmose I only came to power due to this exact situation. Uncertainty would have swept across Egypt. For the nasty brother-sister couple, time was up. After just 3 years on the throne, Thutmose II kicked the bucket when Hatshepsut was about 16 years old. Now, Thutmose II had managed to produce some male children with women from his harem. They weren't considered as pure as the ones that he and Hatshepsut could have made, but desperate times call for non-incestuous babies, as they say. So now one of these male babies had to be chosen, none of them older than 2 years old. This was a rare case for Egypt. Pharaohs came to the throne as children or teens all the time, but a baby required at least 15 years of rule by a regent. Whispers of a new dynasty filled the palace, but Hatshepsut stepped up. She understood that the best way to reassure the people was to make Amun choose the next pharaoh, and in front of as many people as possible. She set up a public ceremony. A statue of Amun was rolled in and the baby princes lined up in front of it. The statue somehow selected another Thutmose, son of Isis, now known as Thutmose III. Thutmose sat on the throne because Hatshepsut was there to make it happen. She played kingmaker at 16 years old. Had Hatshepsut not been there, it's easy to see how the crown could have fallen into unfamiliar hands. Hatshepsut stepped in as regent for the young Thutmose III, which is odd considering that she was his aunt and stepmother, when usually mothers acted as the regent. This shows the confidence that the priests, generals, and bureaucracy had in her. Hatshepsut began a slow, calculated accumulation of power. Palaces, temples, granaries, and the army. Every sphere of Egyptian life soon found itself connected back to her. Rewards flowed out of the royal palace to the Amun priesthood, who now owed undying allegiance to Hatshepsut. Local governors were bribed or intimidated to ensure their support. Taxes across the country were collected efficiently, and temples rose up from the sand. Royal heralds were sent out across the realm and abroad to speak on her behalf and to reward loyal supporters. She staffed temples across Egypt with full-time professional priests with a vested interest in her. She amassed a legion of religious, political, and military supporters. She acquired power slowly, building a broad base of support from every possible corner of her realm. She made it so that supporting her was the logical choice. She never attempted a coup or an assassination. She never tried to ally with a powerful male general because she never really needed to. She simply patiently solidified her power. It now came time to give up the position of God's wife of Amun. She prepared her daughter to take over the role. God's wife was not a lifetime position. She still needed more time to establish Thutmose III's rule. Early in Thutmose III's reign, Hatshepsut had begun carving important messages into obelisks, temples, and palaces across Egypt. Inscriptions that showed her doing things that a king would normally do, speaking to the gods, making offerings, issuing commands, all while wearing the gown of a queen on her body, but the crown of a king on her head. These were traditional masculine tasks performed by a male pharaoh. But here, Hatshepsut, a woman, was claiming these duties, and all before she was officially king. She knew how the people in Egypt thought. As her image became more and more kingly, she made sure to inform her people that Amun himself had personally chosen her to rule. In the ancient world, having a woman at the top of the political pyramid was practically impossible. But against all odds, sometime around the year 7 of Thutmose III's reign, the impossible happened. She was crowned as king. Her title had finally caught up to what she was already doing. From 12 years old to 20, she had positioned herself as queen, then regent, and now pharaoh. Hatshepsut was already running the day-to-day business of Egypt. She was already building temples, collecting taxes, commanding governors, and crushing rebellions. Hatshepsut's kingship provides us with the ultimate case of merit over ambition. Doing kingly things made Hatshepsut king. To publicize her coronation, she erected 2 massive obelisks at Karnak Temple, at the time the tallest in the world. In the ancient world, the creation of an obelisk was a miracle, something only someone ordained by the gods could achieve, and Hatshepsut built these things like crazy. One of which still stands, and the other, which was unfinished, can still be seen trapped in the earth. She erected more pairs of red granite obelisks at the Karnak Temple than any known Egyptian king. All of them partially covered with electrum, so that when the sun hit them just at the right angle, they would light up and appear to capture the energy of the sun itself. In order to further prove that the gods trusted her, Hatshepsut decided to send men to the uncharted land of Punt on a dangerous expedition. Punt was located to the far southeast of Egypt, probably somewhere in modern-day Somalia, Djibouti, or Eritrea. All previous expeditions to Punt had only been completed by the greatest of kings. For 2 years they waited for news of the expedition's return. Then, in year 9 of her reign, they returned with shiploads of incense, precious ebony, exotic materials, and myrrh. Murder? No, it was just myrrh. In the minds of the Egyptians, the entire Punt voyage would have failed if she wasn't meant to be king. As these exotic goods poured in, her prestige soared even higher. And she continued to reopen exotic trade networks that had been closed for generations across the ancient world. This confident pharaoh now instigated a whirlwind of construction. More craftsmen than ever before were working on massive projects across Egypt. Work of this quality had not been seen in centuries. Temples carved out of live rock, massive pylons, and of course, obelisks rose up. The most innovative construction was her funerary temple at Deir el-Bahri. Hatshepsut would call this temple Djir Djiru, meaning Holy of Holies, and holy moly is it amazing. This was a huge colonnaded masterpiece with large open spaces on 3 different layered terraces all connected by ramps. In their day, these terraces would have housed gardens filled with exotic plants and incense trees, all while looking as if it's coming directly out of the mountain behind it. For something over 3,000 years old, it looks shockingly modern. When Hatshepsut rose to power, Egypt was a country mostly made up of buildings of mud brick, and now it had been remade in stone. Meanwhile, Thutmose III grew up to be a healthy young warrior, and she made sure to send Thutmose III across Egypt to learn how to be a great general. She made sure he had connections with the elites from all around the Mediterranean. But in Egypt, a woman could outrank a boy, but not a man. If she wanted to keep hers and Thutmose's rule legitimate, something had to change. Her earliest images show a woman wearing a dress with the headgear of a king. This openly feminine representation wouldn't work anymore. Soon, Hatshepsut would slowly shift all her images to a man's body. She was once again adapting to the times and culture. She hid all her feminine features and images, but continued to use she and her in writings. Proof that she refused to give up all her feminine identity, much to the confusion of Egyptologists that discovered her inscriptions. In order to complete her and Thutmose III's transformation, she threw a Sed festival, which is supposed to celebrate a pharaoh's 30th year in power. It was about Hatshepsut's 15th year. But my girl H ain't got no time for technicalities. After the Sed festival, no temple image ever showed her as a woman again. At that Sed celebration, her co-king, Thutmose III, would have been roughly 17 years old. He had come of age, and the Sed festival would have been the best way for Hatshepsut to formally announce his coming to power. The borders were growing, wealth was pouring in, the gods were happy, and the succession had finally been secured. It was time for Hatshepsut to prepare for her own final end in the Valley of the Kings. After 22 years as the leader of the world's most powerful kingdom, ruling from 1479 to 1458 BC, the king's daughter, the god's wife, and the pharaoh, Hatshepsut, passed away. She lived on in the Thutmose dynasty that she fought tooth and nail to save against all odds. She died as a king, was buried as a king, and hoped to be remembered as a king for thousands of years. But something changed. Despite all she had done to secure Thutmose III's rule, all the hoops she jumped through and the monuments she built, in the end it meant nothing. Thutmose decided to eradicate her from every temple in Egypt. 25 years after her death, her image was hacked off her monuments. In a systematic campaign to destroy her memory, hammers rang out across Egypt, erasing one of its greatest rulers. The sheer volume of her monuments meant that the work to replace her was pretty shoddy. Some of the time, she was simply replaced with an offering table. But mostly we're left with giant Hatshepsut-shaped holes, scarring the walls of the temple she built. This wasn't an act of hatred on Thutmose's part though. Thutmose III waited until the end of his reign to erase Hatshepsut, because it was only then that he needed to establish legitimacy for his own son. He had to prove that the crown went from Thutmose I to the second, then to the third, and now it would go on to his son. Aberrations had to be removed. Once his son was on the throne, the destruction stopped. But Hatshepsut's true legacy lived on, hidden, but still there. Her architectural innovations dominated the landscape, and the wealth she brought her people still helped them thrive. But in the end, her greatest achievement, her most daring innovation, was that of creating the first truly successful female kingship. She pushed aside traditional masculine domination without bloodshed, and managed to keep her family and her country from collapsing. For Hatshepsut, her success was rewarded with a short memory, but time and knowledge have once again let her light shine into the modern day. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. This video has been part of the Bronze Age collaboration, a huge collaboration between me and 10 other history YouTubers. If you'd like to learn more about the Bronze Age, then check out the Bronze Age playlist in the description. If you'd like to see the period before me in Mesopotamia, check out Jack Rackam's video on the life and times of Hammurabi. Or you could go on to EmperorTigerstar's video on whether or not the Americas had a Bronze Age. Every video on the playlist is fantastic, and I highly recommend you go check them out.